let's talk about Kachim. We're talking about the Beis Mikdash. We have to have, I wouldn't call this a retrospective on what we did on Sukkot. And some of you weren't there. We were able to perform the commandment of Netillat Lulav this previous Sukkot. Now, Netillat Lulav is only a commandment in the temple, apparently. So ritual only performed in the temple. That which you see people have done in past years around the world on Hoshana Rabbah, where they pick up an Arava or a bundle thereof and whack it against the floor or against the chairs. It may be Rambam says on the karka or the kli. That is, if you don't want to bend down, so you whack it against the chair or the table, whatever it may be. Those are both kalim. So that's a minhag nevi'im, and that we don't say a bracha on it, but that's only one day of the festival. All the days of the festival, there's something else, Netilat Lulav. And the Rambam seems to equate it with the taking of the Lulav. Sorry, Netilat Arava, which is equated with the taking of the Lulav. Okay, it's just like how do you perform the command of Lulav? You pick up the four species all together and you hold it. Yes, we wave it, we recite hollows, we do it, but the most basic form of the commandment is merely picking them up. And if it's on the first day, you have to possess them as you pick them up, because if it's not yours, then if it's not in your possession, then you can't pick it up. At least that's the requirement. At least the first day, and this commandment is extended to the next days by rabbinic enactment. In the temple, it's a 7-day commandment. Now, the Talmud tells us that, of course, this whole thing of picking up this Arava in the temple, you could pick up many in one shot, but at least one, branch of the willow is not explicit in the Torah, obviously. Now, the question they said was, well, is there a bracha to be said thereon? I have to thank Rabbi Gavril for, he was jumping on me for this one. When I said we were planning to do this mitzvah, he says, oh, you have to say a bracha on it. I disputed him. And it turns out we both have on whom to rely for our positions. And I'll explain to you why. Is there a bracha on this? It says here in the Rambam, see, if you look over here, you have all the halachas here. He calls it halach l'mosh b'sinai shem mevi'in b'mikdash arava acheret. First you have to bring it, and then he's going to say you pick it up and take it, basically. And he says, a man, adam yotzei yedei chovato. This is important. And he says, a man, not just anybody. And down here in the third halacha where he's described, he says, so they take this arava, and every ha'am says everybody gets their own willow branch. There was someone, the temple authorities provided everybody. They took a big trunk of a willow tree down from Motza, and they brought it up to the temple so that everybody could have branches. I see one synagogue, they did this, thank God. I've heard of incidences where they didn't bring enough willows to the synagogue on the morning of Hoshana Rabbah and wasn't enough to go around. Some people didn't realize, everybody gets 5 in a bundle and there's not enough bundles to go around, so open up the bundles and give to more people. You don't have to be a Kabbalist and say, I need 5 branches. With your 5 branches, you could provide 4 other people with the mitzvah. So that's what they should have done. People aren't aware of this. Okay, but the Rambam basically says here that this mitzvah is ein lo niota kol shivadi mechag zeich lemikdash. Nowadays we don't do that if we're outside the temple. The language of the Rambam is pretty clear that this is a mitzvah for everybody to do, and this is a mitzvah that is done in the temple, and it's done by same way you pick up a lulav, netilah. Just like there's netilat lulav, which its most basic form is picking it up, so too the arava, and that's what the Rambam says here. When he equates this, says how do you do the arava? I brought over here the original language the Rambam brought with regards to lulav, which is all you have to do is pick it up, and you've done your commandment. Misha magbin arba'a minim elu. Once you pick these 4 species up, bein sheki bihan kachat bein bezeach harzeh, whether you pick them all together one after another. So bein biyamin bein smol yatsa. Technically speaking, though, the best way to do it is all together, and ideally the main lifting should be with the right hand. Only one species goes in the left. So when someone is asking, why do I tell people to hold in their right hand? Because of 2 things. 1, if you're going to pick up 1 stick, you should do it in your right hand. That's proper for doing a mitzvah. 2, I was holding the camouflage in the left hand. We were holding olive branches. Maybe we could shut off the blech now. It's giving me a burning smell. So that was very important that we do it in our right hand. But technically speaking, someone could have picked up the arava in his left hand. That's what we did. Now that we describe what Rambam says, we're going to say, well, is there bracha thereon? So the Rambam implies over here, where I'm pointing, that there is no bracha to be said on the whacking of the arava as it is performed around the world on the 7th day of Sukkot. For that, that's just the minhag nevi'im, and there is no bracha to be said. The Rambam is therefore implying over here that this act of taking the Arava in the temple, and by the way, they also used to march around the altar with their Aravot that day, or just like every day of the holiday, they would first march around with their Lulavim, so too they march around with their Aravot. So the Rambam's implication over here in the halacha, he doesn't say explicitly, but the implication of the halacha over here in the Rambam is that there is a blessing to be recited. Asher Kiddushan b'mitzvotav v'sivanu al Netillat lulav, apparently on the taking of the lulav. That is what the Rambam implies. However, in his Parish of the Mishnayos, and I brought here Rav Kapach's translation, which says it clearer than, let's say, the classic translation, he says it explicitly that this Aravazo hilacha lemoshe misinai. Chadesha. Oh well. See, it's good that we're looking at this. Let's correct that. See, Shetei Arava Niteleth chus me'arava shebalulav. You have to pick up an Arava. It should be handled, but it's not the Arava that you have in your lulav bundle. And it was the custom of prophets to not say a blessing on this Netillah. Very clearly, the Rambam says explicitly over here in his Parish of Mishnayos that this act of picking up the Arava in the temple on the days of Sukkot, there is no blessing to be recited on it. Very interesting. So we sent this source over here. They have this discussion in the Gemara right there in Sukkot Mem Daled, where it's a little bit confusing. What Rabbi Yochanan seems to be applying, and what Rashi says, that Halachah Moshe Sinai. Basically, we don't have enough time to get into this all the details here, but it's a Kal V'Chomer that Rav Gravil sent me. Basically, if it's a Yesod Nevi'im, Rashi says a Yesod Nevi'im, so there shouldn't be a blessing said on. But if it's a Minhag Nevi'im, there is a blessing. Kal V'Chomer Halachah Moshe Sinai. If you have something that's Halachah Moshe Sinai, and to do something, Kal V'Chomer. As a matter of fact, you can say a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. When the rabbis command you to do something, the rabbis who lived, let's say, centuries after there was the last prophet in Israel, the rabbis of Shimon ben Shetach's time, in whose time Hanukkah was still relatively new, when they lit the Hanukkah candles, they said a bracha thereon. And the Gemara says, Heichon Sivanu. No, it's a mitzvah to listen to the sages. So you could say, Asher Kiddushan b'mitzvotav v'sivanu lahadlik ner Chanukah, or ner shel Chanukah. Okay, both are grammatically, I guess, acceptable. So there is a blessing to be said thereon. Kal v'chomer, if the Nevi'im tell us there's halacha Moshe Sinai to do this, then there should be a blessing to be said thereon. So the implication of the Gemara here, you could see, is that one should say a blessing on the Netillat Lulav in the Mikdash. Okay? Aside from the fact that that's the implication of the Mishnah Torah, but the Rambam himself seems to say explicitly in his parish, which is very strange because it says it's a Minhag Nevi'im, so I would think that you should say a bracha thereon. Okay, maybe it's Takana Nevi'im. The Rambam make a distinction. If it's just a minhag that they did, and we're copying them, so there's no bracha to be said. But that was the description of the whacking of the Aravot. Very strange. So this and other questions really need clarification. Lama Davar Domeh, I just saw before. I was asking about this. You probably heard there was a case here in Israel of a couple. They're having their fertility issues. They went to the fertility clinic, and they underwent IVF. And this woman's been pregnant. She's had a difficult pregnancy. Usually, if Hashem, unfortunately, is preventing people from reproducing, and then they try to cheat their way into it, and like they force the issue, it doesn't mean it's going to go perfectly fine. Okay, that's just basic biology there. So this woman had a difficult pregnancy. About a month ago, she was going to be having some pre-birth surgery. The child needed something to basically, I guess, is life-threatening, but whatever it was. Part of the things that they did in prep for the surgery was gave the fetus a genetic test. And it turns out the fetus was not genetically related to her or her husband. It was another couple's fetus, another couple that was going IVF. And another couple showed up and actually claimed, yes, this is our missing fetus. So the question presented to the rabbis was, so whose child is it? Is it the mother, the woman carrying the child, or the woman from whom the egg was taken? Of course, her husband, who also contributed genetic material to this mix. It turns out that recently they found out that the couple claiming this, it's not their child either. Instead, this woman's giving birth now. She gave birth yesterday or 2 days ago to a child that is definitely not hers, but we do not know whose it is. They haven't uncovered the couple. They haven't figured out who is the donor couple, the unwilling donor couple. So the question presented to the chief rabbis today, I know, I heard that the Sephardic chief rabbi himself has basically uh, consulted others. He's basically let the Machon Pua rabbis, give their 2 cents on this one, because they're the ones who deal with this all the time, and they're the ones who actually, Machon Pua, they're the fertility experts. And the Ashkenazic chief rabbi, Rabbi Lau Jr., has ruled today that the child is halachically that of the birth mother, what's called the pundakite, the surrogate, apparently, the unwilling surrogate. She thought she had her own child, it turns out it's hers. Now, I can understand that argument. If this were a shear on that, we would see all the arguments. I think that that's perhaps even the correct sock, but who cares what I say? What I do believe, though, is that for these and other questions, you cannot rely on the opinion of one or two great rabbis. You definitely should not. And even if you had the world's greatest rabbi here right now, he cannot be the one to decide such a thing. The Torah does not want such a thing. For something that is so, I guess, groundbreaking and matters, especially for Am Yisrael, the Torah already has a mechanism for deciding these halachic principles. And what is it? You need a Sanhedrin. This just brings home the, I guess it brings home the point that for these just simple questions, is there a blessing to be recited on the performance of the Arava, the mitzvah of Arava, and even more consequential questions about who is the child, who are her parents? You can't just leave it to one person. You need 71 great opinions discussing the issue with each other for a proper amount of time, and then voting and letting the majority rule for Am Yisrael. Should not be the domain of one person to decide, whether, even if he's the chief rabbi, even if he's the so-called whoever the Haredi media anoint the Posei Kador, that is still wrong. It's not the way it is supposed to be. So it would have been good if there had been a healthy discussion. And I think this is also what Rabbi Bar-Hayim was mentioning. He said, as people tried to make a Sanhedrin, he wanted to discuss the real issues that affect Am Yisrael, serious things, not the kashrus of tuna fish, as you said. You need to get these things, and the Am Yisrael needs this, especially if you want to run a temple. I've seen it that the headquarters of the Sanhedrin, where they're supposed to be deciding these important questions, where they literally sit, is adjacent to the temple, and it is not a coincidence that is the way it is supposed to be. So we should have a temple, and for all these questions, like we've seen as we go through these halachot, whenever we get to this, what should it be? Is it like the Rambam or the Ravid? How many machlokos have we seen that are actually critical to just bringing the most basic korban? We cannot bring a korban b'tumah until we have a properly clothed high priest. It won't work. And all these need clarification. They need a decision to be made, and the decision needs to be made according to the proper the proper people and the proper mechanisms and the proper procedures. And the last question was, who actually does this? You read this also, the sugya over here in Sukkah Mem Daled and on Mem Gimel. Rashi says quite clearly, and also it's on Mem Daled there, they're asking the question with regards to the Kohanim. And Rashi adds to this question, the Gemara asks, why is it that we made a takana against, let's say, waving the lulav on Shabbos, but against the Arava on Shabbos in the temple? And the Gemara says, well, because the lulav is everybody doing it in his own home. Can't supervise everybody, but the Arava is given to the Shluchei Beis Din. Now, what does that mean? The way Rambam understands is the Shluchei Beis Din are the ones who have to bring the Arava to the temple. Bringing the Arava to the temple is the thing where you could potentially violate Shabbos. Why? Because you have to bring something from outside the city. That's carrying an Rosh Hashanah. That involves a malacha. That's why they said, don't carry around your lulav, because you're going to carry it where you shouldn't be carrying on Shabbos, carrying it in the Rosh Hashanah. But Rashi adds that, and by the way, the only people who actually perform the mitzvah of Arava, or at least do the hakafa, are the Kohanim. Why? Because technically speaking, you can't circle the mizbeach. Why? The western side of the altar, between the ulam and the mizbeach, between the anteroom of the temple, the actual edifice of the temple, the room that was always open before the actual gates that they open and close every day, and the altar, that was off limits. It says only Kohanim could go there. So if you have people carrying a ravot and they want to march completely around the altar, so by force you can only have Kohanim. That seems to be the way Rashi reads this. So you could say that one, well, yes, the hakafa is only done by Kohanim according to Rashi, but it doesn't mean the Netillat is not done by everybody. The Kohanim march around. But the regular people just hold on to their Aravot and stay where they are. They stay where they're allowed to go. Or you could also hold like the Rambam and say, regular people are also allowed in that area between the Ulam and the Mizbeach. They are allowed there. Normally, they're not supposed to go there stam, but if they have any business there, sacrificial business, if let's say that's where they have to slaughter their sacrifice and they want to participate in the slaughter, then indeed they could go there and stand there. And we have a positive tradition that sometimes, the temple got crowded. We mentioned this before. The Azara was crowded, and they even entered the actual temple edifice. They entered the Ulam because of the crowd. So that maybe that's b'diavad, but people did this. And most importantly, it is implied in a number of places that the hakafot that they did with the lulav were done by non-Kohanim, that this was considered part of the sacrificial service. It was a Torah commandment that we celebrate before God with the lulav and esrog on 7 days of the festival, and that involves handling the lulav and esrog and apparently circling the mizbeach. So they did that. When it was time to do it, they did that. And just like Jews circled the mizbeach with their lulav and their esrog, so too they did the circling of the altar with their aravot. And it's also seems to be the implication of what King David said he would do. King David was not a Kohen, but what did he say he was going to do? King David said he would wash his hands with cleanliness, and then he would circle God's altar. So David was declaring his intention to do such a thing, which means, as an Israelite, that's what he was intending to do, and it must have been permitted. Otherwise, God would have told him, no, you can't do that. Okay, so it seems, basically, in conclusion, after reading these sugyot, that we hold like the Rambam, that one, the mitzvah of Netillat is performed by everyone in the temple, and ideally they should also have a procession around the altar. Everybody's allowed to do that. And with regards to whether or not there's a bracha to be said on this, I think the jury's still out, because there's Gemaras that imply it, there's Rambam that implies it, there's Rambam that disagrees. Like, hey, he's going to say it's a machlokes, the Rambam and the Rambam. No other poskim, you're not going to find Rif and Rush and Shulchan Aruch on this. You're not going to find Torah on this. You're not going to find Be'er Hagra on this. So we need a psak on this soon, and I hope it'll come about.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.